It takes courage to build confidence with anything. But I find that money specifically, we have to really take a step back and start to look at that root of that problem for us to really make a shift. The Moms Makin Dough podcast. I am your host, Kendra Hewitt, and today we're going to dive into what usually appears as a frequently asked question of both clients, friends, and family members recently, including a question I've been asking myself. And that is, man, I'm making great money. Where does it all go? And why am I not rich yet? I guess. And I heard this term this week and I absolutely love it. I'm diving more into it is working with several of the business owners I work with. And one of them talked about how, it's end of tax season. We're on the tail end of tax season. And so a lot of people that filed know what they owed, what they made. And one of the things that came up, this is why this organic conversation started happening, is about how I have quite a few women, myself included, like I said, in the past couple of weeks, that have asked myself this question. And this term is Henry. It's becoming a Henry. I'm going to have to figure out the female term, but Henry stands for high income earner who is not rich yet. And it got me started down this path of a conversation with, like I said, one friend, one client of how we start making money. And then it's this law. I actually should look up the name of the law, where as we start making more money, our expenses start to expand too. We start to have more capacity. And a lot of times, if we don't check ourselves, we start to wreck ourselves in weird ways where then we look back a decade previous and we're like, shit, I made a lot of money, but what happened to it? And on another episode, I'm going to dive into building your financial team. That's going to be my next episode. But today, I wanted to really bring it back to the basics because remember, on Moms Making Dough, we're here to talk about all things money, how you make it, how you manage it, how you maximize it, and how you multiply it. So today is really the foundation of Moms Making Dough, though, is really talking about our money mindset. And the reason I wanted to dive into this is that a lot of times I'm start reviewing like conversations I've had, and I start looking at my content calendar, and I had something totally scheduled different for today's episode. And it made me really start to think that I'm starting to get a little bit like too prepped for these episodes where I'm really teaching some content. And I wanted to dive into more of an organic flow today because one of the things that I started to realize is that if you do not, which I know is true, if you do not fix your money mindset or make a shift in your money mindset, I can tell you to do 50 things in terms of tasks oriented. I can work with you on strategy on your business. But if you have not made the mindset shift that allows you to start to embrace and start to attract that money, then it doesn't matter. And I'm going to give you an example. I was working with a client today, and we were talking about adding a different level to her funnel of offerings for her clients. And while we were chatting, I was like, "Oh my god, do you realize where we started?" At this time last year, she's a client that's just had her 1-year anniversary with me. And I reminded her about what was her original want and why of starting to get coaching. And then fast forward to what we were talking about today, and I was like, "I want you to just stop for a moment and savor the shift in your mindset from where we started to where we are today," that just came out of your mouth. And so it really started getting me thinking about money blocks. And money blocks are things that sometimes like others can see in us, but we can't necessarily notice in ourselves. And how it shows up is usually we'll start to see a symptom of some sort. So we'll start to chase the symptom instead of get to the root cause. And the root cause is always going to be like the story you tell yourself about it. So, the number one key to getting past any of your money blocks is always to get inside the story that you're telling about it. So, and when I say the story, I think that this could be really watered down at times. So, I wanted to dive in a little bit more detail of what I mean when I say that. Because when I'm working with someone, or if I'm even like thinking about this myself is like my first question is like, what is the story I have about that? Like, how did I get here? What was the cause of this? But not necessarily I know what exactly what that is. It starts to formulate over time. So I'm going to give you an example today of one I did this week. After I did the episode of personal credit building, I had someone reach out to me that wanted to work through building some of her credit back up. So we started chatting, and I didn't plan to do this, but what ended up happening is I started reverse engineering her thinking a little bit. So I was like, well, what's the biggest challenge you have with your personal credit? And it was that, like, she just has too much consumer debt. And then so I was like, "Okay, that's the symptom." And I was like, "Tell me the story about how you got here." And so we started chatting, and then I started asking her different questions like, "Can you tell me the story about why you can't have it? Why you can't be debt free?" And that got a whole different other response going. And then the next question was identify the story behind what you want. Well, that was really, really challenging for her. So I would help her take the steps across the bridge, I call it, to really start to identify what is it she really wanted. In this case, she really wanted to be debt free. Now that was the tactical strategy point. Like that's what how she wants to measure it is like, hey, I have no consumer debt. And right now I have, $14,000 of debt. So we started chatting, and this was supposed to be a quick conversation, of course. And then next thing you know, 30 minutes goes by, and we are going down a whole other rabbit hole. And that rabbit hole is really starting to work her towards getting to identify like what is the story behind this debt? Like where did it come from? And she's in her late 40s, and we started chatting, and she started to realize that this was the story dated back to college, her college years when she got her first credit card. And she started paying her own bills, but not her regular bills like rent and, at school and that sort of thing. It was more like they gave her a credit card. It was supposed to be for emergencies, but emergencies took on a whole new definition at college. Like it was like going to the liquor store and like things like started piling up on this credit card. And then she gets out of school, she has a school loan, and a couple years goes by until she has to start paying her school loan. So this is a very common scenario, which is why I want to use this one today because she could tie it back to getting this original credit card because previously on to having this credit card, she had never had a form of payment that she had been trusted. Her parents just got in the habit of paying for everything, which for me, like this was like setting off so many fireworks because like for me, I'm just like a huge advocate of like what like teaching your kids to be responsible with money as soon as possible. Even my 4-year-old, like, I sprinkle little lessons here and there. I'm sure I could be doing more. I'm sure I might be screwing things up at times. But the reason I bring this up is that, like, here she is in her 40s realizing that when she was 18 years old was the first time that she was, quote, "trusted with money," and this is what the story became, is that she was not trustworthy with money because her parents said that this card was for emergencies, and she immediately did not have the self-control to abide by that boundary, and also too, on the parent side, they never really checked up, they never really questioned. So, before she knew it, she's finishing college, and every year she would quote, "go to work" to pay off her credit card from the previous couple months when she was at school. And, she was saying about how this vicious cycle that she's never ever thought about started, where it would be like, "Spend it now and I can always pay for it later." But then there was always one more thing she needed, and she had no boundaries around it. She didn't know, like, what the limit was. Her parents were making the payments on it. So she had no responsibility with this trust that was given. So her story became, "I'm not trustworthy with money." Even though she was really specifically talking about how, like, she wasn't trustworthy with having credit and she didn't have the skills or the habits necessary for her to start to instill these because there was just no guidance. Like I said, she was at school, and then she was talking about fast forwarding to her first job, which, first job out of college, wasn't making too much money. She was in finance, and she was just working at a local bank, she was telling me. And I kept asking more questions, like, tell me more of the story. Like, what stands out from this part of the story? And the reason why I say that it's so huge that you have to start to identify the story you have about whatever it is that's where you're stuck with your money. In her case, it was personal debt. Is that she realized that she wasn't making too much money, but she was then, because she was making her own money, this was the first time she was bringing in her own money that was also required to pay the credit card. She started to see this differential of like, hey, I'm spending. The more I make, the more I'm spending. And I was like, ooh, dig a little here with me. So she started to share a little bit about how, like, her lifestyle. She was living in New York City at the time, so it was like very expensive to live, still is. And she was just saying about how, like, she basically felt like she was on a runaway train with her finances and never really had anybody that was, like, checking up on her. So even though she had no other people holding her accountable, she felt very bad and a lot of guilt and shame around the fact that she just wasn't good with money. "I'm bad with money," she would say at the beginning. So we started really looking at the, story, which, like, man, "I'm bad with money" is like, if I had a dime for every time someone said that, I'd probably be a wealthier even wealthier, because it's amazing about how a story and little saying that simple, "I'm bad with money," can really put you on this trajectory path that, if you don't get in check, will really start to run your life. So fast forward past that first job, she starts advancing, switching companies. She starts her own financial planning firm. And here's what was the thing is that she was in a very specific sector of financial planning. And here's a financial planner who has this mindset unconsciously that she's really bad with money. So next thing she knows, she starts like running that same pattern in her business, to where she had to start laying off employees because she couldn't afford to pay them. So, we are chatting about this and we're working through all this together. And I started to ask her, I said, "Can you tell me the story of why you are bad with money? Like, where, like, more detail." So she started working through it. And it came down to this mindset of that, like, she doesn't deserve it, which I can totally relate to. I'm sure many of our listeners here today at some point can relate to this. So we started chatting and I was like, "Well, what do you really want in the future? I know you don't want any more personal debt, but can you tell me why?" And she was like, "Man, I just wanna feel empowered around my finances." She's like, "I wanna be able to give my kids whatever they want, but I don't wanna have to feel bad about it once I give it to them." And I was like, "Tell me more." So we kept digging. And this is the kind of work, when I'm talking about shifting your money blueprint, that most people will not take the time to do, that is so critically important to actually do. So, keep going. I start keeping asking her questions. And so I said, "Tell me a little bit more about this deserving." And so she starts telling me, and I start to realize that she has a story of why she can't have money. And this was totally rooted in a totally different experience than the college. And here's where I stopped her and I said, "I want you to start to see that in just 20, 30 minutes of a call, you've told me 3 different stories about money, but they are all negative stories, and they are all linked to a specific event or experience in your life. And now they're manifested in your business where you're in, like I said, a financial sector, but you feel like you're shitty with money." That's how she kept saying it. And now it's manifested in a totally different area in terms of, like, not being able to make your payroll. And she talked about how the not making being able to make payroll and not being able and having to let go of some of her employees at the time just totally crushed her. And now she's building a totally different business, but she's committed to the fact that she doesn't wanna repeat the patterns of the past. So we really got into this conversation about getting unstuck in whatever your money blocks are. And we definitely identified a couple of hers. And we didn't have time to really dig into them too deeply. That will be the start of our next conversation. But the reason I'm bringing up this up and I wanted to share this on the podcast is we all have some sort of money block, myself included. Um, and I think that some of us need this reminder to just stop and actually step ourselves out of the situation and stop looking at the symptoms. The symptoms like, hey, I'm carrying a lot of personal debt. Hey, I owe this much in taxes and I don't have that to put aside. Hey, I'm not paying myself. Whatever those limitations, what we see as our result, that we want to actually shift and change means we need to make a shift and change in the underlying story that we have behind it. So, this is exactly like I said. If you don't have my money blueprint exercise, I'm going to link to it in this episode's show notes because it is so critical. It does take time. It is not a 20-minute exercise. You can spend 20 minutes and do really surface level, or you can spend 2 to 3 hours doing that exercise. And here's the thing with the money blueprint exercise, the first thing we look at is getting to the root cause of what's the story you're telling yourself. And sometimes it might be the story of why you can't have money. And other times it might be the story behind why do you want to have money? And really starting to look at what are some of the shifts I need to make in my mindset, not my habits. That comes after, right? Because if we're looking for a transformation, first of all, if you're looking for transformation, you usually don't need more information once you've got to the story. A lot of people I find that say they're bad with money, they think that they need like a tactic, like they need approach or a strategy to be better with their money. But the reality is that they really need to confront the story that's keeping them stuck in their current money block. So today's exercise is going to be one that I gave to this specific client. And I asked her, I said, listen, I want you to start to do a little bit of digging. I want you to pretend that you're an archaeologist and you're going back in time to look at the crumbs of all of these stories that might have added to the result, brought you to the result that you have today. So in her case, like I said, personal debt too high. And then a business that basically went bankrupt and she's starting over from scratch in a whole different industry. And she's determined, which is why she reached out to me, to not repeat the pattern of the past. But for you not to repeat the pattern of your past in money, which all of us at times are going to do this until we start to learn that lesson behind it, is to really get to the root cause. And the root cause is usually the story behind why you're bad with money, or you can't have money, or you make a ton of money, like she said, but I've spent even more. And just really start to look at that story behind behind your money blocks, because it's so easy to focus on the money block itself. Like I said, racking up personal credit debt, or not paying yourself first, or spending too much on that you didn't have to spend, or something like that. Whatever the story is, the result of that story. So I want you to really just dig in today to getting behind some of the stories. And the way that you're going to do this is you're going to look at like what is the money block, and you're going to reverse engineer this. So like I said, in her case it was the personal debt. And I want you to work back from the personal debt and be like, listen, what is one of the patterns that actually got me to the personal debt? So this is some of the behaviors or actions. It might be, this is a personal one, but it's kind of funny. It's one that came up for me on that call, and I think about it now often. Is that like I would tell her about how like when I started making more money, I would just like on a Friday, I would just go to Home Goods and just kind of no need to go in there. I would just kind of go spend some time there, and like I loved decor and interior design. And I would just that for me was like relaxing, like a way to decompress from my week. And so I would go there and, I would spend like sometimes I would spend $100, sometimes I would spend 200, sometimes I would call Ryan and be like, I need you to bring your truck because I just bought 2 new chairs and a new bookcase, and he would want to kill me. But he would show up and do it. And I started to realize that, like, literally, like, all of these trips to these little random stores without a purpose and intention behind them Like, even though I enjoyed it, it wasn't in alignment with what my real goal was, which was to have more savings for me to then invest in things that actually were assets, not two new chairs and a bookcase that I'd probably put on the side of the road a couple years from now and with a free sign on it, right? So I want you to start to really think about like what is that end goal that you have? And what is the story in between the results you have right now and the story that needs to be created for you to get shifted in a new direction on chasing that new money goal. So, that's what I want you to do today is just really start to figure out like, hey, where's the one area of my money I am stuck? What is the one habit that has got me there? And then what is a possible story I have behind this? And at the beginning, when you start doing this exercise, you're going to be like, man, that seems so surface. The story's going to feel very surface. And once you get some story, you're going to get some momentum to start to dig behind the scenes, like the paleontologist, right? Or the archaeologist, I guess I should say, where they're starting to look at like the bones of the past. So you're looking at, or your story bones of the past. And then we're going to start to make some conclusions of like, hey, what would the story need to be for me to start to get unstuck in this specific area of my money? And what you'll start to find, like I said, if you are whether you are a working mom, a stay at home mom, or a business owner, this applies because we all have stories about money. But the only way we start to shift them is if we get really to the root so we can build awareness and then we can create the shift. Then we can create this shift in the habits and the behaviors, and we can start to get a totally different result. So I hope this episode's super helpful for you to just start to get that mind thinking on like, hey, where in my money mindset do I need to make some shifts? And if you're like me, chances are you know exactly what you need to do to make some shifts. I just went through this, even shared some very brutally honest stuff with my husband of some of the shifts that I'm feeling that we need to make in our businesses and also our personal lives. And even though I'm the host of this podcast, I'm every single one of us is constantly in evolving, maybe at different levels in our money. And it takes courage to build confidence with money. It takes courage to build confidence with anything. But I find that money specifically, we have to really take a step back and start to look at that root of that problem for us to really make a shift to a new identity with how we handle our money. So it's no longer fun to say, hey, I'm bad with money and laugh it off. It's actually way more fun when you get to say, like, man, I'm managing my money like a freaking boss. And my family's getting to go on a vacation this year because I manage our money so differently. And it starts with looking at your time and also your money as a vehicle to whatever it is you want. And that requires you to also get pretty clear on what it is you want. So, number one key to getting past your money block is getting to the root cause of the story behind it so that you can start to shift your behaviors, which will then shift your results. If you guys love doing this stuff but would like me to guide you through it, I am going to be doing a free 30-day money challenge. The link will be also in the show notes for you to sign up. You can also direct message me at Kendra Hewitt on Instagram, Facebook, and I will get you registered. We kick off next May 1st. So it's a 1 hour call with yours truly for the next 30 days where we start to work as a group through the accountability and getting to the root cause of your money blueprint so that you can then start to make a shift as soon as as we go through the challenge. You're going to start to get one singular focus on your finances, and I would love to have you join us, especially if you're a loyal listener and really like the content I share. You will absolutely get so much out of joining us in the group and not only hearing me share, but women from all walks of life who are committed to the same exact thing, which is putting fun in their finances instead of, oh, fuck. So I hope you guys have a really, really good day. And thank you for taking the time to listen to another episode of Moms Making Dough. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you love. And also remember, rate, review, and subscribe is super helpful for me to not only know what lands with you on content, but also to help our show grow. Thanks so much. Have a good day.